We also have architect Damodar Acharya, who has been practicing architecture in Nepal for 15 years. He is trying to introduce contemporary architecture, design elements in public buildings, and has been awarded the Outstanding Youth Professional Award for the year 2017, recognizing his works in architecture sector by Nepal Engineering Association. Please welcome architect Arjun Basnet, Director and Principal Architect at Shrishti We Create Private Limited. He is also Deputy Head and Senior Lecturer at the Department of Architecture, Himalaya College of Engineering, and other reputed institutes. I'm excited to have him here with us. We also have a very young architect, Suyog Kayastha, with us today. After completing his Bachelor of Architecture in 2015, he, with his two friends, started the design firm 3 Dots. His firm, within the first year of establishment, became the winner of design competition of NAS Technology Building, which is now in its completion phase. Welcome, Suyog. Last but not the least, I would like to welcome architect Professor Dr. Bharat Sharma, who will manage the show today as our moderator. He did his master's in landscape architecture and environment planning, Harvard University, USA. He presently teaches in the Department of Urban Planning and Architecture, Institute of Engineering, Pulchok, Lalitpur. He also teaches in the Kathmandu Engineering College and Tribhuvan University. Welcome, sir. It is an honor to have you all here. May I hand over now to Professor Bharat Sharma.
So, Professor Sharma has some connection issue right now. He's trying to reconnect.
Oh, I see. So we can take it from here. First question to Dr. Jharna. Fast responding structures using existing underused spaces, adapted reuse approaches, emergency architecture is unfolding. What are the shifts you see, the way this will function?
Thank you, sir, for the question. And you picked up, I think, a good one for me, because I work mostly in historic preservation, and reusing, readapting buildings, traditional buildings is my specialty and my interest as well. So, in this past few months since the COVID has hit the whole world, we've seen two trends, I think. China started with building from scratch. What was it, for 5,000 bed hospital, whereas UK in London, they reused exhibition hall, a big hall, to adapt it to make it convert it into a hospital within days. And in Nepal here, we have also been quite innovative, I would say, because given our resources and limitations, and this was quite an emergency response, like you said, and I think no one had time to prepare for it, think too much about it. So, but like always, we've been using schools and exhibition halls for this evacuation. I think this has taught us a very good lesson that it's better to use what's already available than try to construct everything from scratch. Also, one is because it was an emergency, and this has given us, I think, good practice in the future on how to respond quickly, how to take stock. for this, I would say, for future, I think we were a little bit weak in like identifying. We did it after the crisis hit, but now this, I'm hoping that this will provide us an opportunity to like take stock of what we have. For example, even public buildings or public spaces, like what buildings can be converted into these kinds of emergency hospitals or quarantine centers or isolation centers. And we kind of have a short memory, but I think the experience of the 2015 earthquake also helped us, even a little bit. There was something there, and we had come together very well at that time, so that gave us some sort of preparedness. But still, this is very different from other kinds of disasters, because the basic thing is, as humans, we are, we need social contact. We need to get together to do work, and that's how, as a society we function. But this pandemic is something that, the first thing that comes into mind is like, we need to keep distance, physical distance of like 2-3 meters. So that I think even culturally for us is quite a challenge. And to take that into consideration, to take into the consideration all the cultural norms, and to when adapting these new, building new designs or adapting existing structures to these kinds of disasters, it's hopefully something that that will give us a good trend. I mean, we already had some of it, but these things were not taken too seriously. I think this pandemic is kind of like a warning bell for us to take like building regulations or zoning regulation a little bit more seriously, because there were a lot of thought went into preparing the building guidelines or the zoning guidelines. And if we look closely at our guidelines, these kind of things are already there. Not everything, but some of them are already there. Most of them are already there. So, but we've been a little bit slack in following up with it. So hopefully this will give us an opportunity to rethink and be a little bit more serious about implementing the bylaws as well.
I was wondering that in this pandemic, every hotel is empty. Every hotel is empty. 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, every hotel is empty. Why would governments not use hotels as hospitals? Everything is ready. The staff is available, kitchens are available, rooms are available. We don't need to spend any money. In fact, the hotels that are bleeding so badly could get some remuneration. They could be paid some amount that would cover their cost and see them through this. Arundev, Pant, what would you feel? Do you think that using of hotels would have been a good idea than to just build schools or use other public spaces? You've gone on mute again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
So, you see, we are working with a lot of tourism sector clients, and they all have this problem of what to do because of this coronavirus episode. So, the topic of our discussion today is also the new normal. And I'm looking at the scenario, and I don't think it is normal. It feels very abnormal. In fact, I feel that we're in a transition before it normalizes. So I think once it gets normal, definitely all the hotels, the schools, everything will be online. I think these pandemics, from historical evidence, shows that there is a start and an end to it. And once it ends, it becomes normal. So the transition, this period that we're looking at right now, is how we can best try and be as close to normal as possible, yet keep in mind the safety and the health of the people. So until a vaccine is found or until better treatment options are there, we have to look at what resources we have. And I think the new normal is something that I don't think we'll ever reach that. So I think what we'll do is, if you look at the hotel industry, some of them have already started looking at ways on how you can, have better sanitation, how you can have better distancing. Perhaps some of the smaller resorts could open up with independent cottages and all that could open up first and start training people on how to handle, larger guests and all this. And it's the same thing with our own profession as well. The construction sector is also, as well as the design sector, which are all, we are looking around and seeing how we can adapt to this situation. And I think, yes, it is true, the tourism industry is very hard hit, but you can see examples outside the world where they have become very innovative. So the issue is, I think it comes down to an agreement on what is a safe way of proceeding. I think it should be a governmental level initiative on saying, okay, the construction sector or the hotel sector and all these are necessary for the economy, and therefore you need to open it, but with these guidelines, with these standard operating procedures. We have been looking with the Society of Nepalese Architects has had a lot of information from the other members in the region, from Japan to India, that have been sharing their standard operating procedures for different sectors of industry. And I think that could be one of the starting points for our own profession. But if we are looking specifically for the tourism industry, I think if I remember correctly, during the earthquake, a lot of the engineering fraternity, they came forward and they did a lot of groundwork, went to do the analysis and went to do a lot of, formulate a lot of guidelines on what to do with the houses and how to repair them and how to keep people safe. I think we need the medical fraternity to come and help us in different sectors of the society to tell us how and where. They should actually step up and help the government on how and where these standard operating procedures should be implemented, because we cannot go on like this for a long time. Thank you.
Right. I see Professor Sharma on. Namaste, Professor. I hope your connection is okay now. Please take over.
Could I join?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Talwar Sahab. My question goes to again Arun Panta. Mr. Panta.
Yes, sir.
Talking about the theme, new normal. For me, this has become a buzzword now. Do you think that scenario would come whereby we would call it new normal? Our profession could really flourish?
I think, thank you for the question. I think we can at best do with what we can with, for example, our profession, architectural profession, for example, we can do a lot of work from home. Okay. So we will try and reduce the congestion in the office for the time being. But keep in mind that all design effort is actually collaborative. It's collaborative among engineers, architects, contractors, the workers at the site, as well as the client. So unless you have this collaborative mode, no real true design and construction process can happen. It's not that we have so automated that tomorrow without labor, the buildings are going to go up. And it is also a big source of employment and economy. And for the economy, it's very important that the workers will also have to be found a way, whether it's a testing regimen, whether it's safety and health guidelines given by the government, that all of the economy has to kickstart as soon as possible, not later, but the sooner. that is where how we can be a semblance to normal. And to be, and as I said, I think the goal is to be normal, not the new normal, but this is a transition phase. By the time, hopefully, it will not be a very long one, but we have to prepare.
Thank you, Arun. Well, I have yet another question. You are planner also. In that context, when we design a township or settlement, in that context, how in a spatio context and socio-economic context things should be going on?
As a planner, what I can tell is that our spaces should be adequately controlled to allow for movement, but to keep at a safe distance. If you look at other countries, they have opened up their market areas, but with a strong distancing measure. Now, either that has to be very strongly implemented at the governmental level. Some of the countries are very well disciplined, like you can see the examples of Singapore and South Korea, where they are almost proceeding as if it were a normal time. So these our cities and spaces are congested. I agree. Traditionally, they have been very high density. If you look at even a rural town like Jharna works in Bandipur, even though it's a very rural outpost, the buildings are very cramped together. So the safety becomes an issue. But there are a lot of open spaces, either the main street or the plaza or the internal courtyards, that we can look as the way to go forward on how to protect the people.
Arun, in that context, our socio-cultural setting is very gregarious, very tight kind of situation. And in that context, we have, earlier very successful settlement around the country, Kathmandu and Bandipur. You pointed out. I will be coming to Jharna also. In that context, do you feel there has to be a paradigm shift in our architectural conceptual approach in new situation?
No, I'm not sure I can hear you. Can you? I think what Jharna said recently, a few minutes back, was that lots of the plans and the bylaws are there, some that allow for some of this segregation. But I think we need to look at it as a opportunity to revamp what we have in context with the historic settlement. I think Jharna would be in a better position to answer this question.
Earlier on, you were talking about tourism-related infrastructure. In that context, it reminds me of Dwarika Hotel in Kathmandu, and a very renowned architect like Rem Koolhaas also, really passed a very critical kind of thing, that this is a paste and cut kind of architecture. This is no architecture, whereby what we find on the contrary, that a lot of tourists come to that Dwarika Hotel. Where is the gap? What makes tourists come to Dwarika Hotel?
Are you asking me this, sir, or is this for someone else?
No, I'm asking you.
Okay. No, I think in context of tourism, the heritage of Nepal that is embodied in a project like Dwarika has always been a landmark project, and you can see that the tourism entrepreneur as well as the tourists themselves use that as a prime choice on what to do and where to spend their time in Nepal. So I would say that tourism products like this would definitely be one of the starting points for revival of economy once the tourist starts flowing in.
Okay. Now to Jharna, Dr. Jharna. Earlier on, he pointed out about Bandipur, and you have quite a passion for conservation also. Now, in this same context, how do you respond to protect our conservation of the settlement like Bandipur or other places? Isn't it quite a daunting task, whereby we have to really change our socio-cultural way of living also? Do you think that we have to get away from that?
The thing about heritage conservation is it's very for a country like Nepal, it's very donor driven. Not only for Nepal, but in the West as well. Conservation, monumental conservation depends a lot on public funding, and in this the next few years when the businesses are being shut down, and it will take quite a few years to, for the financial sector to get back on, or the businesses to get back on. Heritage conservation is not going to be on the highest priority for a long time. That is one of my fears. I think because that's the first thing the budget is going to be cut is, the taking away from projects like what is essential. There's a lot of talk about like essential business. So is heritage preservation going to be an essential business? And since it's donations are given when people have an extra something. Now with a lot of businesses struggling to make ends meet and to pay for the employees, saving a little bit for themselves. Now putting that money into heritage preservation, or giving it as a donation for such projects is definitely going to be impacted. But having said that,
the question Dr. Jharna, the question that I was raising is that in this context, we say that there has to be social distancing, cultural distancing. So in that context, how do you safeguard the settlement like Bandipur and compact settlement in other places where we have a socio-religious cultural kind of thing where we worship by mass? So is it that the whole life cycle has to be changed?
We will have to make some changes in this, but I think that is mostly a short term. Talking about Bandipur, actually Bandipur is a very well located, well situated. It's on a hilltop. There's very few entrances or access to it. And so, by the way, Bandipur, the construction works have been going on in Bandipur for quite a few weeks now. They have not given permission, the local government has not given permission to start new work, but whatever work had already started before the pandemic has been allowed to continue. And this has been going on for about a few weeks already. And this is because it's a protected, it's on the hilltop with limited access. So people who, you can control better who gets in and who gets out. So and because they depend a lot on local labor and local materials. So for those reasons, Bandipur actually has been very lucky and to be able to continue work. It's for me that's difficult that I can't go there by physically. A lot of the work has to be managed through just telephone calls, which is quite inconvenient at times. But our city, not only like hilltop towns like Bandipur, I think our cities, there's a lot of there's quite a bit of talk going on about how congested the cities in India or Nepal are, especially the historic cities. In the case of Kathmandu, the cities of Kathmandu, yes, there is some congestion, but if you look closely at our cities, the historic core, if you go around them, there's a lot of public spaces. There's a lot of chowks. There's a lot of squares, temple squares or whatever. So there are quite a lot of public spaces that people can actually go out, just outside of the houses for people to stay. Whereas in the newly built towns, I don't see that.
Okay.
So I don't think these historic cores are the problem. The type of settlements are the problems. But like you said, there are some cultural norms that we practice, like we have to touch things. that is definitely going to be impacted.
Thank you,
we have to read.
Could I come to Damodar? Could I come to Damodar Acharya? Could I come to Damodar? Damodar?
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Are you around? Damodar,
yes,
you have been, your consultancy firm has been quite actively involved in public sector areas. Now, yes. What is your, in this context, in this COVID situation or the post-COVID situation also, how do you really safeguard the safety of the people around working in the design that you have done, and what has been your experience?
Sir, thank you, sir, for the question. The public sector projects are almost closed. Not only public sector, the private sector projects are also not in operation right now. And in this context, there is no particular issue of safety of the workers at the site because no workers are there at site. But regarding the points of the discussion in today's webinar, I think the public sector buildings and projects which are ready and that are not handed over to the client, that can be used as quarantine spaces that can be developed at minimal cost, I think.
In context of here so far the type of construction management we have been doing, do you think there has to be departure from the past construction management way we are dealing with our construction works?
Yes, definitely, sir. Now the construction management procedure completely has to be changed in the situation like this because we have to maintain the social distancing, and construction process maintaining the social distancing is a challenging one because in large projects there need to be a lot of people working together, so it's really difficult to maintain the social distancing. So operating the construction works in such a situation is a great challenge, and I personally cannot answer how the construction management should be done. And regarding the availability of the people for the construction, in Nepal, most of the construction workers, like from masons to electricians and plumbers, majority of them are from India and from Tarai region of Nepal. So it's not.
Okay, thank you, Damodar. Could I come to Arjun Basnet? Thank you.
Sir.
I will come to you again. Arjun. Yeah.
Yes,
Arjun,
sir.
You have been attached with the academic institution and where you have been teaching. Now, in this context, how do you think that? Do you think that the way of the syllabus of our architectural education, the way things were being taught, pedagogical aspect, has to have a change or not?
Thank you, Bharat, sir. For the past 1 month, we've been brainstorming as to how we start the new academic session in the engineering colleges and in architecture schools. For the time being, we've been communicating with the management. We've been communicating with Institute of Engineering stakeholders, and we've also been communicating with the students. And a lot of information has been shared among us. And the first and the foremost challenging task is how do we actually start the school? How do we continue the school in this situation that we've been talking about, the pandemic, the transition, on all that? We've been thinking of trying to make this situation as a new normal. I mean, we're talking about normal. We've been taking this situation as a little bit abnormal, and the situation we used to have before as normal. But we've been hearing a lot of people saying that the situation that we had before the pandemic was abnormal, and the situation that we have is now supposed to be normal. We have to live with this situation maybe for months or years. So we need to go along with this pandemic, the COVID-19. So we also have to start business as usual. So we've been talking to students, those who have the logistic, and then most of the students want to start the online classes. So there are students, I mean, there are a lot of, we are not prepared before to start school, but now slowly we have been thinking about starting school. So as far as the course and then the content of the course is concerned, maybe my personal view is that we need to have now, I mean, due to this situation, also due to the earthquake 5 years ago, we've had a lot of changes in our perception of teaching, learning, and in the profession. And again, with this another pandemic, the natural disaster that we can see all around the world, we need to think about our syllabus as to respond to crisis, respond to emergencies. We've been talking a lot about context and all these aspects, but how do we collaborate, or how do we convert these issues into addressing emergencies like that we have?
Arjun, very briefly, in new normal situation, what is your gut feeling that there has to be change in our pedagogical approach in teaching in architecture?
First of all, I mean, architecture is, there are a lot of subjects that we need to teach 1:1, like, I mean, studios and all that. We cannot do it, I mean, it's not that practical to do it online. So that is, I mean, we need to think about how do we want to continue the studio if this happens for a long time, how do we continue? So we need to think about that. So this is one aspect. And the other aspect is to teach students in a different modality so that, I mean, they, when this kind of emergencies happen, they can work into their profession with a new approach, like, I mean, responding to emergencies, converting existing spaces, or designing whatever they have into converting them when needed into a multifunctional spaces. Like we're talking about hotels to be converted them into quarantines at the moment. So if the design approach is conceived from the very beginning, so that we can convert it when needed into quarantines, then how can we do that? So this is one modality we should think about, and then we have to talk about.
Thank you, Arjun. I'll come to you again.
Flexible design.
Thank you, sir. I want to talk with Suyog. Suyog?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. You are young. Where's Suyog?
Yes.
Suyog.
Yes, sir.
Panelist. Oh, you are there. Okay, you are young and energetic architect, upcoming. In your view, you know, new paradigms infusion has to be there or not in our architectural approach?
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Could I repeat my question again?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
In your view, what do you feel as a young architect? There is a dynamic role of, there could be a dynamic role of young architect, you know, it's not the age, you know, it's the idea that counts, you know, and young architects, they bring a lot of ideas, you know. In that context, what do you feel that, what could be the role of young architects in context of infusion of new ideas to really uplift the situation?
First of all, I would like to say that I will not call this as a pandemic. I would like to say it as a time of global awareness. And honestly speaking, our home is currently not suitable within itself. And I would also like to ask 3 questions to all the people who are sitting in their rooms. The 3 questions are: what is the
you are free.
What is the best design space of your house? Second question is: what is the best view you can see from your house? And the third question is: what is the one thing you would change in design of your house? So if the people who are living in their house have the answer to these questions, then I believe they have proper understanding of the architecture of their house. So with this new normal...
So your question goes to rest of the panelists also. Rest of the panelists.
But especially
you with getting answer from other participants.
No. So the questions are just a realization only.
Get back to Arun. Arun, how do you respond to his question? Arun?
This question, no, it's a very good question by a young architect. I think what he's trying to say is, have we been designing things correctly? The pandemic allows us to sit back and think and rethink what is important. For example, a lot of European countries realized that balcony is very important. When they got stuck at home for months on end, there was some area that even if they were living in an apartment, they had a place to go out and interact with nature at least. You know, have a feeling that you're going to go out. So this outdoor access to outdoor light and ventilation, all of these that will help us, you know, stay healthier and strong and against these, you know, discourage the pandemics. If you look at historically, most after the Industrial Revolution, all the very bad housing and industrial tenements led to lots of diseases and epidemics. And urban planning and a lot of architectural improvements happened during that time. So what Suyog is saying is that maybe at the design level, at the initial phase, this is something that we can also start considering. I think this is what he meant, but anyway, I think we can answer it better.
I want
about
to add,
his second question.
I have to add something
about your second question.
Hello.
Arun?
Suyog say something because I think he has a point to make on this. Suyog, go ahead.
Yeah, I had to add some point to this. Like we had that time 5 years back when we were hit by the major earthquake and we were bound to live outside of our house, thinking our house should be safer. And now we are locked inside our house, thinking our house should be better, because at that time we only consider the safety of the house, but not the betterment of the house. So rethinking our requirements should not only be to respond to the current situation of COVID-19, but it should be in response to the collective significance, the history that laid out that we have not been acutely responding to. And the history have also shown that in every 5 years we were hit by a major epidemic, like in 2003 by SARS, in 2005 by MERS, 2009 or 10 by swine flu, 2015 by Ebola. So we have to collectively think on all these aspects. And
okay, so listen to Arun. Arun, how do you react?
No, I think what we have been ignoring for a long time is the importance of health and safety over, I think, a lot of very commercially driven interests. I think we are all to blame for trying to get the maximum FAR out and the maximum coverage and to make the most on a piece of land without really, you know, keeping in mind the safety and the value of this openness, the open spaces. I understand that public areas are spaces for interaction, which will be again under pressure. So in fact, public areas need to be even bigger. Now, if you're going to have social distancing, you're going to have the same number of people fitting in a larger area. So what Suyog is saying is correct, that we may have to rethink some of the basis of even our bylaws, even if the way we are approaching to design, keeping more with the more pandemics and all this happening over the years. I think this is what we need to focus. Maybe this is a time we can do some rethinking on how our city planning and how our settlements have been.
Suyog, I will come to you. Now over to Damodar. How do you respond to his questions?
You'll have to unmute. You have to unmute.
Damodar?
Yes, sir. Suyog rightly said that.
How do you respond to his question?
During earthquake, we all said that safety is the major factor. And like in this situation, current situation, we think the betterment of functionality is the major. We give it a main priority at this state at this stage. So I think the better planning of the buildings plays a major role for the situation like this. And in the current context, I think we should propose a changing room and a shower at the outside of the building, in every building, so that We can, when we enter our building, when I enter our house, we can take shower and we can change our dress and then enter our building. That is also one of the major thing, like we have to consider while designing particular small residential type of projects. Yeah, I feel this situation in my house right now.
Okay, thank you, Arjun. Jharna, to you, how do you respond to his question from your conservation point of view? Jharna?
Well, I think these things were already in our traditional buildings and traditional settlement, not just in the valley, but outside in the villages as well. And but the important thing now, I think, for everyone is that, and those who have a little bit of space, they're very, very lucky at this point, is this thing about these inside and outside. I think with this, well, most people, especially living in apartments, have, like Arun was saying, that it's appreciate now the outside a little bit, that they can bring into their homes, like terraces and balconies as such. And the like Damodar was just saying about hygiene, I think that is going to be on people's mind for quite some time. So that is something that has to be even in normal situation, not without this pandemic, that is something that we need to give put into consideration when you design as well. And for the future, I think there's a lot of things, innovative ways of doing it, or equipments like touchless, zero touch, whatever. These things might, I think, will be gaining popularity in the next in the future, in the near future as well. And we already have some of those. A lot more, I think.
Thank you, Jharna. Now to Arjun. From an academic point of view, how do you respond to his question? Arjun?
So most of the things have been answered already. I just want to make it brief. During the earthquake, we went, as all of the panelists already told, we went for strength in the construction. We did not think about, a lot of stakeholders didn't think about the ambience of the spaces, the interior spaces and the functionality. So traditionally, as Jharna ma'am already told, we had all of these amenities in our traditional architecture. In the Newari architecture of the Kathmandu Valley and in the rural areas, we all had balconies, we had PD, and then we had angan. We had all of the different spaces. Now that has been converted into only a few rooms, or one or two room houses. So now we are losing that amenities that we need actually during the situation that we have now. But during the practice, during academic practices, we've been telling them, giving them examples, giving the students examples about how spaces can actually revive the energy level in the people, those who reside in these houses. So this situation will go sometimes longer, and we need spaces to energize our daily activities. Thank you, sir.
If time permits, I'll come to you again. Now, I have a question to Talwar Sahab.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sahab?
Yes, please go ahead, Professor.
Yeah, what prompted your organization to come with the theme, new normal, and to work out as a facilitator for better tomorrow? Was it your corporate responsibility or something else?
It's like a CSR. We are a 50-year-old company in this field, and we have been interacting with architects from the very beginning. And all architects are friends, whether they're older or the younger ones. So when we were sitting at home, as we were discussing yesterday, for the first 1 week, we were shell-shocked. We didn't know what to do and didn't do anything. Then we realized that we better use this time because this is not getting over in a hurry. So then we got this idea to start interaction, to start interacting with the architects and developers and have an interaction between the community. So which we started, and it's gone well. And And the new normal is such a pertinent question that, is this going to be the new normal, or will we go back to what we were earlier?
Okay.
Yes, it appears to be the new normal, and we would have to continue like this going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Talwar sir. Thank you. Now I'm back to Arun again. Arun?
Yes, sir.
Arun, I belong to landscape architecture, so that's why I have quite a concern for environment and natural endowments. Now, in your view, do you feel that somehow in our planning approach or design approach, we have been getting away from the symbiotic relationship between the natural cycle and the human cycle? And because of that, the Mother Nature is really kicking us back hard.
I think there is definitely scope for improvement, but this does not mean that all urban centers will be the main victims in this pandemic, because urban centers have been shown to be very reliant. In fact, there is a lot of resilient actually, and in fact, there's a lot of theories about how urban centers are actually more efficient than a sprawled out area where the population has taken over the entire countryside. So there are pros and cons to these ideas. But in all the cases, whether it's a dense urban one or whether it's rural development, the role that our interaction with nature and the role that the amount of respect we give to nature as part of the project, I think, becomes tantamount. And I think this is a little bit of a wake-up call, as you rightly pointed out, sir, that we may have to, rethink some of our approaches to the design. So,
as you are a very successful architect and planner too, could I ask you a very weird question? In Powai,
right, sir.
Bombay, Hafiz contractor did the so-called, new township with his big ideas. Do you think that we architects, planners in Nepal would have that kind of thing apart from the economic aspect, that could be a good model to follow, or it has different kind of connotations?
I think our density is going to never match New York and Bombay, so that type of solution may not necessarily be the way to go. Though the concept of well-planned township can be something that we can see outside Kathmandu, where there is more space, like upcoming centers in Viratnagar or Chitwan or Bhairava Butol. Those areas can have a better planned township, maybe akin to what you just pointed out. But I would think that as of now, one of the reasons that I feel that we are slightly in an advantageous position is we do not have so many high-rise building areas that we are packed into right now. Most of the apartment areas were not, after the earthquake, a lot of people didn't realize that they're actually structurally well designed, but just visibly they were falling into a lot of damage. So it's not that the structure was an issue, and it took a while for people to understand that it was actually safe, but it didn't feel only. So now with increased understanding and all, people are now comfortable with high-rise structures. Similarly, you need a sort of a culture to live in high-rise. So if you look at...
If I was to get your candid opinion, how do you feel there is a difference between Hafiz contractors' approach and Charles Korea approach in India, which we could learn or we shouldn't be learning?
I would think that both have actually contributed significantly to the architectural field, whereas Professor Korea has also done a lot in the academic one. So we can learn from our neighbors the type of settlements. Both of their work would be good case studies for how Nepal should be able to go. And I think we can also learn that there is a culture related to higher density and higher rise. For example, if you think about Hong Kong, it has managed to handle the pandemic very well, despite the fact that it is one of the most congested cities in the world. So, not the densification itself is definitely, there is a threat that there is, if you're living in an apartment, that you may be, too many people living in the same corridor. But then, if your habits are there, that you can understand how to live in an apartment, they are equally safe, it seems. So I think it is up to us to choose that when we are ready, we can go for the Bombay type development if necessary. But as of now, I think we are better off, as we are not yet saying that we are better off with our smaller scale development. And I think that would also answer your question to some extent.
One question, in our pre-COVID situation, all the bylaws that was framed by the local government, personally, I have different opinion. As a practitioner, very professor who is practicing it is ethics and very professionalism. How do you feel that what would be the situation of the bylaws that have been running around these days?
I would.
In
this
Nepal.
This is one of
Kathmandu.
the things that we talked about. I think what Suyog also rightly pointed out, that when you, it's good to know that young architects are also looking at what is critical. That if you had to change something, what would it be? That's a good question he had asked, actually. I think one of the things that we need to look at is the context of open space and carrying capacities as far as densification is concerned. And in that context, we, I think, need to have a comprehensive review of the bylaws. Maybe this is a time that we can see how we can improve our cities and also give directions to all these upcoming cities all over Nepal now. You see, we are rapidly urbanizing. We are going to be repeating whatever Kathmandu has done to all the other places in Nepal. This area, I think...
Are you happy with the prevailing far?
No,
are you happy with prevailing far in Kathmandu?
This is where we need a lot of improvements, especially in relation to the open space. And with this pandemic, I think this will also show us a way that I think where it says what is important, how much the natural open space visa and as well as the density, what are the constraints and how much leeway can be given in different scenarios. I think this is something that we need to work together with the municipalities, with the governmental bodies, as well as the experts in the fields of planning and architecture.
Now over to Jharna. Jharna in context of, again, conservation, area of conservation and the bylaws right now, being prevailed in Kathmandu or Nepal, are you comfortable with the bylaws?
I'm more uncomfortable with people not, implementing the bylaws than with the bylaws. I agree our bylaws are quite basic, but that is quite a good start, I think. For me, it's a good start. And also these are, guidelines, bylaws, they are something that are there for guidelines to guide you. How you interpret it is what matters. For example, in conservation or in restoration of historic buildings or in the historic towns, people are just going in for the the facade. It's more as facade.
Then what is the reason that? Then what is the reason that very ancient settlement, very successful settlement like Bungbati is facing difficulties and things are bizarre?
There is one I think is because our understanding, like we are, even the engineers and architects, we do not understand the importance, or we are understanding our buildings as we should. The other thing is, on the contrary, the other thing is that this attraction for newness. We as human beings, we are always attracted to new things, and there's there's a certain stigma attached with, the old or traditional as well, that's looked at as uncivilized or backward. And so we are attracted to newness as such. So that is a very, very strong thing that we have to fight with when we are doing work in historic settlements. The other thing is also the materials. The new the new construction materials, just like cement and bricks, the new materials are very readily available, whereas the traditional materials are not as easily available, and quite for wood, it's quite expensive as well. If you have to use a lot of wood, that's expensive as well. And there's I also feel like there's a lot of advertisement for like new materials, how strong it is, and it's also especially after the earthquake, we are very much into like earthquake resistant buildings, and there's a lot of hype going on about how these new materials are stronger and better than traditional structure, traditional technology, which I don't agree with, but that is what we are fighting against. And so it's it's a lot of complicated things, and when we are trying to build a lot of things after like earthquake, when everyone's building and there's a lot of work going on, we don't have the time to like think. So it has to be built immediately. So that is also, the time factor is also very complicated. And the other thing about why we are not being able to build in, like I said, coming back to your first question about bylaws, and if we could interpret the bylaws a little bit more seriously, like for example, one small example is like it's in the historic areas in the World Heritage sites, you should not build, the guideline is to build up to 35 feet or 3.5 stories. There's a reason behind it and why, and but we don't understand that. And we say like, okay, it means like up to 35 feet, and you build up to 35 feet or 45 feet, whatever, without giving consideration to the context. Not looking at your neighboring building or looking at the overall context. So when you don't really understand what the traditional building is or why you are building it, and just look at bylaws as a set of numbers or rules, like 1, 2, 3, it's just like tick mark. You'd say, okay, my building is 35 feet, my floor height is whatever, that, or I have a brick facade. That doesn't make any sense. That's what is happening with our bylaws. That's why I mean, like, bylaws is a guidelines that we need to understand a little bit more deeply, and there has been quite a lot of thought put into it. So why was guidelines as such? So that I think that it is our own understanding, and of course there's the attraction for newness is always there. So that's a difficult battle.
Okay, thank you, Jharna. Now, to you, Damodar, how do you take the bylaws and the power prevailing right now in Kathmandu?
And after this, Professor, there are a lot of questions that the audience is asking. So if you don't mind, we'll also take some questions from the audience so that people can answer.
Okay. I wasn't told. I thought that I should hang around the panelists only. If from audience, it will be fine. Sure.
No,
Damodar?
Shall I answer?
Yeah, you please go ahead and answer.
Okay, thank you. So regarding the
you complete you.
So regarding the FAR and the prevailing bylaws, there are many misunderstandings and many shortcomings that need to be improvised timely. But for me, practicing, I'm doing what the prevailing bylaws is, and as rightly said by Jharna ma'am, it's not the problem of the bylaws, but it's the problem who implements the bylaws. So I don't think the bylaws are that much insufficient enough at this moment that for practice. It should be improvised time and again. But the bylaws and these guidelines, they have not considered. They have not considered the situations like pandemic situations. So for these aspects, the open spaces and coverage issues that should be addressed. And while designing the buildings, the minimum coverage and maximum open spaces, that should be very good for the situation like this. Like we are at this situation.
Okay, thank you. Suyo, very quickly, how do you respond? Suyo?
Suyo, your mic.
I will not like to focus on the bylaws and the terms which were been discussing for so long in the past also. But the better part of this is this pandemic is that this will lead us to create a better system in the future. I guess because the learning from the past and putting the learnings into action can be a better solution for the future. And I believe new technology can refuel our design, our construction system, and many other systems that will help us to face this new normal.
Okay, thank you. Arjun, very quickly, few words.
So bylaws, for now, I mean, the bylaws should also address the new problems, the emergencies that we see. I mean, for example, the current pandemic. So a situation like this, that has also be addressed by the bylaws. So existing bylaws may not be able to cater all these issues.
Okay, thank you. Sir. Now, Mr. Talwar, off to the participant who are interested to pose questions.
Yes, so Anika will ask, she's been receiving all the questions, she'll ask. Anika, please go ahead.
Okay, so first question is from Pranita. After this pandemic, how can we modify the construction technique, including for the workers? Because the normal first aid that should be followed isn't being followed. And now this distancing, how can we manage as soon as this ends in your ongoing projects?
Who would like to take that?
This question goes to whom?
Anybody can answer.
Will take, I guess.
I think anybody can.
Yeah, anybody could answer.
Whoever would like to answer.
Yeah, okay, I will answer.
I think the private sector side, I think Damodar can probably give us a little bit of insight on how the government sites are working. So I think it's the safety of the workers has to be guaranteed through testing. I think a lot of testing has to be done, at least screening, testing, and a very strict segregation of areas where the daily workers come in vis-a-vis the people that are living on the site. In fact, it makes more sense to have limited number of people working at a site and limiting, daily workers from coming in. And I think that is one of the most important things. And we need to work out, okay, the project may be a little longer. It may take more time to carry on. But I think the safety is something that we should not compromise on. And I think as the testing becomes more and more available, this is something we can do immediately. And it's also very imperative that all the workers that have gone home and are waiting for this opportunity to come back to work for their livelihood and for their families, given a fair chance to do so, but under safe and constantly monitored conditions. Thank you.
The next question.
Anika.
If Damodar wants to add anything to this?
From my perspective also, safety is the first issue, because we cannot, nobody should tell someone to work without his or her proper safety. So we should guarantee safety for all the workers in the site and the spaces like their living spaces, quarters, and all. We have to make sure that the proper security and safety has to be there for the workers. And this might take, as also mentioned, this will make the project duration longer, and it will definitely impact the whole project process. So in this case, for new projects, we have to go for newer options in terms of material and technology. Like we have to train our local workers for the project, so that we don't need to wait for the people who are now out of the valley for them to come back and start our work. So we have to search like a new technology. I mean, technology that is locally available technology with local experts and local manpower. We have to develop our ideas like this way, I believe.
I'd like to add a little. I think in larger construction sites, there are safety engineers. So I think it will be the added responsibility of these engineers to look into this physical distancing as well. So I think that has to be added in the new format. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. Next question is from Rikesh Shresht. It's directed towards Arjun. Do we have to teach students in different ways in design studios? Do we have to change our planning approach and design approach?
So, I mean, it is a matter of concern at the moment. We've been brainstorming a lot about this. So for maybe design thoughts that can be done online through virtual screen or distance learning. But I mean, the stream that we have regarding the studio is 1:1 student teacher. So they have been contemplating and then explaining. So there are a lot of things besides the drawings. I mean, the expressions of the students, the designer, and all that. So I mean, the physical thing is very important. I mean, the one-to-one contact is very important in studios. So I don't know how that can be addressed in this new situation. But I mean, a lot of us can discuss, and then we can bring out the thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question from Abhishek Mananda. Past pandemics have always brought specific changes in the components in built environment. For example, during the plague pandemic in the early 19th century, the connection of sewage pipes were changed from right angles to curved surfaces to avoid the accumulation of waste. So what changes do you think could this pandemic bring to the built environment?
Anika, would we make it last couple of questions?
Yeah, we'll take one more question after this.
Okay.
Who would like to take this question?
Okay, I will answer that question. I think these pandemics are not random events that affect society suddenly and without warning. And every society produces its own specific vulnerabilities, and to study them and to understand the structure, its standard of living, and its political priorities, they also reflect our relationship with the environment. Like Abhishek have asked what the history has suggested us, because this pandemic is also about learning from the past lessons, because what we are discussing here is just a pandemic which could have a possible cure. But this is the prime time when lessons must be converted into actions, and to show how prepared we are to not let the human moral fall. And as if it were an airborne disease, then each individual, yeah, and if it were an airborne disease and each individual had to carry an oxygen cylinder or should live in a contained environment, we would not have been having this discussion over here. We'll all be locked down in our house and be prepared how we will face the society and the system. So the lessons learned must be always converged into